Taking an early morning cab out to Dublin Airport recently, I got chatting with the driver and I asked him, so was he finishing or was he starting his shift? And he said that he had been working the late night shift, but that he had an awful fright that night. And I said, of course, what happened? And he told me how he had picked up this fellow who he looked a little bit dodgy, but he said he wanted to go to somewhere that was an okay address. So he said, fine. So he brought this fellow. And just before they got to this place, this fellow in the back of his car said, actually, no, can you bring me on to such and such a place? So the driver was going towards there and then realized that this was actually a cul-de-sac. And something in his head, largely stories that he'd heard from other taxi drivers, caused him to think, no, I don't want to go down that cul-de-sac. So he simply stopped at the edge and said, no, I'll leave you here and we'll just call your fare, whatever it was. And he said it was a little bit cheaper than it was. Well, this guy took out a knife and put it to his neck. And he said, Euronia! And he used some really bad words and then ran away without paying for the fare. So this guy was a bit shaken, of course, because he'd had a knife put to his neck and he drove off, but he was just grateful that he hadn't been harmed. Later on, literally just an hour or so later, he heard about a friend of his who had now been taken off to hospital in Dublin because something similar had happened. He had been lured down to pretty much, it sounded like, the same address. Everything that he had was taken. His watch, his wallet, anything that was in his car. He was beaten up really badly and his car was torched. And he was just thinking afterwards, well, two things. One, I don't know that I should do late night shifts anymore, even though the pay is better. But secondly, that thank goodness that he had had the spidey sense to figure out that this was a bad idea and that he had learned from other people's stories and ideas. And I guess what I want to share with you from this story, and certainly something I took from this, is that the way that you will learn and that I learn is really from those things that we experience or the stories that we hear from others. And if you are trying to lead others in a direction where you need them to really get something into their head, that it's far better to encapsulate that in a story rather than in facts and details. His spidey senses really paid off that day, and it will for you too.